Peg Halacha Vav, Hilchos Sukkah. A person can eat and drink and sleep in a sukkah all 7 days, both by day and by night. He's obligated to. So, because of the Peirush, like we learned, hey, you have to do it both by day and by night. Once forbidden to eat any meal outside the sukkah all 7 days. But if you eat something which is just a temporary eating, not a meal, kibeya, like an egg, or pochos, or yesamat, a little bit less or more, that's okay. What does not sleep outside the sukkah, even a temporary sleep? But one can drink water and eat fruit outside the sukkah. Somebody who's stringent, and doesn't want to drink outside the sukkah even water, this person is praiseworthy. Maggid Mishnah cites the Mishnah in Sukkah, and in 25a, and the Gemara in 26a. It says that temporary eating is like they did by Bebe Rav, and he ate something, then went to say the drasha, whether meaning this, who was hungry would taste something and then go into the learn. Rambam explains that the size of this is an egg or a little bit more or less, and so would be from the Gemara, it would seem so. And Chazal tell us that when he writes V'chein kozu zal, this means the Ritzchi Geyus said so. When the Maggid Mishnah writes V'chein kozu zal, Agos Maimonides explains that the words of the Maggid Mishnah you find in Sukkah when they gave Reb Tzadok to eat less than a pegabeya, he took it with a cover, like a napkin, and he ate it outside the sukkah. He didn't make a brocha afterward. The Gemara says that an egg you have to eat in the sukkah. So the question from Rabbi Yosef, the question on Rabbi Yosef and Abaye, who say that they ate a little bit before they went in to hear the lecture, the Torah shiur, that's more than a beya. The answer is Reb Tzadok took less than a beya because he shouldn't have to wash his hands and do birchas hamazon. But if it's more than a beya, he can eat it outside of the sukkah. Therefore, we see that it's is more than a beya. But according to Tosfos the Shulchan Aruch, you can eat outside the sukkah only exactly like a beya, not more. Infers from the language of the Rambam that you can't eat only if you ate a temporary eating that there's no forbiddenness when you eat temporarily. But we begin with, one should be careful from eating kazayis bread or more outside the sukkah, and therefore he says only if he ate a temporary eating the size of a beya. After the fact, he did not transgress. But to begin with, even a beya, he has to eat only in the sukkah. And you don't sleep outside the sukkah, even a temporary sleep. The Maggid Mishnah cites the sukkah, Masechta Sukkah 26a. You eat it's a temporary eating can be done outside the sukkah. You don't sleep a temporary sleep outside the sukkah. What's the reasoning? So Rava says, Ein kev al shena. There is no permanency to sleep. Like Maimonides adds that it's forbidden even when he knows that he won't fall asleep, because there are those who have the opinion that it is because maybe he'll fall asleep and sleep a permanent sleep. But a temporary eating, that for sure is within his power to decide he's stopping to eat. But sleep, once a person nods off, even though he meant only a temporary, we're afraid he'll sleep a longer time. But Rav is machmir, he says there's no such thing as a temporary sleep. And even if we'll say somebody should wake him up, he can't sleep outside because there's no measure of what's called permanent. Maimonides cites that at times a person can sleep just for a few minutes, and he has and that's enough for him. So that's called keva even for a few minutes. And besides the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Elo said, a person sleeps a little bit and it's enough. And so it seems that certain people need less sleep. And this is what it means, in keva l'shinam. Shena means there's no measurement to it. And now that we're lenient, I'll say the sukkah is like something which calls for a person to become a robber, because it'll come to his house to steal. And maybe there's a weakness in the world. It says a person has to live with the Torah, and at night they were makel not to sleep in the sukkah. Further, we'll see they were lenient in Europe, it was very cold. But by day, one should not sleep outside the sukkah. And Rambam says you can drink water and eat fruit outside the sukkah. The Maggid Mishnah cites the Mishnah. Minadin, actually, according to Halacha, 2 dates or a bucket of water or a little bit of water, you don't need the sukkah. The Goz Maimon cites that there was an incident that they brought Rabbi Yochanan Mezakeh to taste from the pot, 2 measures of keseves and water, and he said, bring him up to the sukkah, I don't want to eat outside. And this sukkah was at the top of the mountain, that's why he says, bring it up. The Gemara says that they were stringent, that it would be permissible, but if somebody wants to be more stringent, that's within his rights. Therefore, the Rambam continues, whoever wants to be more stringent, not to drink outside the sukkah, even water, is praiseworthy. Rabbeinu Manoach cites Yuma, that it says you should eat the fruit, you don't need a sukkah. He explains that eating a fruit is temporary, and even if he wants to set it up as his meal, because fruits are not a meal according to most people. Therefore, if somebody eats only fruits in the sukkah, he doesn't make a bracha b'leisha b'sukkah. In Halacha Yud Beis, we'll see that the Rambam is the opinion when he comes into the sukkah, he makes a leisha b'sukkah. But those who say you make a bracha only when you eat on the fruit, you don't make a bracha. But meat or cheese or eggs and fish, then it's possible that you do have a meal and you have to make a bracha. You have to eat them in the sukkah, and you have to make a bracha leisha b'sukkah. Everything that you're obligated to eat in the sukkah, you make leisha b'sukkah. When it says that a person should eat 14 meals in the sukkah, and you can complete that measurement with dessert items. It doesn't mean with fruit, because they're not obligated to a sukkah, but it means some sort of a dessert which has in it either cheese or eggs or meat. Now, on what the Rambam says, if one wants to be stringent, one may do so. Rabbeinu Manoach cites Sukkah 26b and Yuma 79b, and he brings to the Baal Ha'ezel that even though one is stringent, he shouldn't, to eat it in the sukkah, he shouldn't say leisha b'sukkah, because that it's only a stringency. And he continues, there are those who say that you need a sukkah for wine without eating, and because wine is beloved, and it has its own brocha b'agofen. And yain can also be called a meal, as we find in Bereshis. Vayasav HaMishte Gadol. He made a big suda when he finished nursing Yitzhak, or on the 8th day, depending how you learn it. Umishte, and a suda means drinking wine. Only on wine, the Rambam says, you eat it and drink it in the sukkah. To explain what it says in Halacha Hey, you can eat and drink and live in the sukkah. That it would seem that simply so, every drinking should be like water. Halacha Vav says eating and drinking and you sleep in the sukkah, because there it's not talking about water. But you can drink water outside. Rabbi Manoach explains the intent of the Rambam as like those who have the opinion that it's forbidden to drink wine outside the sukkah. But it would seem from his language of Rabbi Manoach, it's questionable if you're obligated to drink wine in the sukkah, because he says, somebody who is stringent, may he be blessed, but you should not say leisha b'sukkah on drinking wine because it's only a fruit, and fruits are not obligated to have a sukkah. And he cites as a source in Brochus. We don't find it. In Tosfos and Brochus explains that if somebody washes his hands for fruit, he is considered from the hardy people because, and they were talking about that he washed his hands to drink wine. Shulchan Aruch gives us the halacha: you eat and drink and you sleep in the sukkah all 7 days, both by day and by night, and you don't sleep outside the sukkah, even a temporary sleep. The Mishnah Berurah says the measurement of a temporary sleep is brought down in Hilchos Sukkah. You're not supposed to sleep with tefillin, a temporary sleep, which is walking 100 amas. And it would seem that this is not considered a temporary sleep. He cites as a Pri Megadim that even in a sukkah, that's the measurement that would be also. The halacha, he says, you can't put your head between your knees, even though in such a situation you won't sleep for a long time, because what was the opinion that sometimes there's enough sleep for a person. The Mishnah Berurah cites in Bigur Yaakov that somebody fell asleep outside. When he wakes up, he has to go to the sukkah. The Mechaber permits eating temporarily outside the sukkah, and he explains that temporarily means even up to an egg of bread. The Mishnah Berurah explains that it's not called a meal that requires a sukkah, because even in his house, he will eat such an amount outside the house. And the mitzvah of sukkah is to live as you would dwell in your home. And you can do this a few times, as long as it's not in one sitting. The Halacha says that a little bit more than a beya is called a permanent eating, even if you do it just once temporarily outside, like in the Shulchan Aruch, by how much you can eat before the Ma'ariv. Like Rashi and Tosfos and the Rosh and Aran, like a person, they used to taste something if they were ravenous before they went to hear the shiur, because the measurement is kebeya, that the person's throat cannot swallow at one time more than 2 kezesim, 2 olive worts, which is the size of a beya. Not like the Rambam and the Ritzchageyos, that even a little bit more is permitted. The Shulchan Aruch permits you to drink water and wine, to eat fruits outside the sukkah. The more adds that even if he set aside his meal on fruit, he can eat outside. Mishnah Berurah adds that fruit, even a lot, or meat and fish and cheese and other foods, are considered temporarily, as long as they don't have bread. Not like a menoyach, that it's called a meal if he eats meat or fish or cheese. And there are those who say that if he drinks wine on a constant basis, he's liable, he has to drink in the sukkah. And certainly a group that got together to drink wine. Now the brocha, many achronim say leisha b'sukkah only on bread or something that's made with one of the 5 different species of grain, if he's going to eat it as a meal. The Halacha cites in the Ritva that drinking a revius of wine is called a keva, and he concludes that, like the Chacham is saying, you can eat outside the house bread only if it's less than a beya exactly or less, and you don't drink wine outside the house. Therefore, somebody who drinks wine has to drink in the sukkah. Mechaber adds, who is more stringent on himself and he doesn't drink outside the sukkah, even water, he is praiseworthy. The Mishnah Berurah says, certainly if somebody is stringent, he shouldn't eat pas, even temporarily. Furthermore, the Mechaber says that somebody who establishes a meal on one of the 5 types of grain, which is wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and corn, he has to be in a sukkah. And the Mishnah Berurah says only when he eats it in a group, or he eats it a measure which is a substantial that you establish for a meal. Not everybody eats a little bit like an egg for bread, but he brings to the Magen Avraham that even a dish from the 5 species It's like bread, that more than a gebeya, a little bit you're obligated to eat in the sukkah. The Shabur also cites Leisha Basukkah. The later commentaries say you should only if you have a meal, and many later commentaries say one should be stringent to eat, not to eat meat, fish, or cheese outside the sukkah if he's eating a meal or a group or more than a kabeya. But if it's not permanent suda, it's all right. And certainly, you don't make a brocha leisha basukkah because there's some who say you can eat it outside the sukkah. But something that's made from the 5 species, if he decides to eat it in the sukkah, you make a leisha basukkah. He brings to the Maimon Mordcha that by bread, meaning cakes, you say mezainis, you eat them in the morning with coffee, even though he doesn't say amoitzi. He's not going to eat a shiur that's establishing a meal, which is 4 eggs worth. He has to sit and eat this in the sukkah because he's eating a meal. And you make a brocha leisha basukkah even without drinking the coffee. The coffee is not what you make a brocha on. Since he establishes the sukkah with his cake, you make leisha basukkah. If he didn't establish a meal, but you can eat more than a kebeya. There are those who question whether you should say leisha basukkah. The Mishnah Berurah cites Shabbos Yontav after the davening. There are places that make kiddush. They only eat cake, and even if then they go out, etc., goes for any hours until the meal, they can make a bracha when they make kiddush leisha basukkah, that it's considered a meal because kiddush requires meal and meal requires kiddush, and he's making it an established meal. In the weekday, it's not correct to make a bracha because we say Sovek brachas lahokol. We're not sure, but in the weekdays, it's not correct to make a bracha. And people make a bracha even in the weekdays on Mazonis, Leisha Basukkah, and in order to be, because they're afraid of a bracha levatolo, they shouldn't go away right after they eat a little bit. They should sit there, and they should have in mind what they're sitting in the sukkah. Ramoy concludes, what we do not sleep in the sukkah, only those who are very stringent in mitzvahs. There are those who say because of cold, there's trouble, there's pain. It's painful to sleep outside because in Europe it's very, very cold in the season of Sukkot.